Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call tonight's regular council meeting to order and ask for approval of the agenda with the inclusion of the yellow supplementary information. So moved by Councillor Parkinson, second by Councillor Logans. All those in favor? Motion's carried. The second motion, I don't see the staff sergeant here, so we will just move on and move to adoption of council and committee meeting minutes. Regular council meeting of November the 3rd. Move approval by Councillor Casper. Second by Councillor Berger. Any questions, errors, omissions? All those in favor? Motion's, thank you. Motion's carried. Special council meeting of November the 6th. Move approval by Councillor Casper. Second by Councillor Berger. Any errors, omissions, questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Our inaugural council meeting of December the 1st. Moved by Councillor Parkinson, seconded by Councillor Casper. Any questions, comments? There's one comment that I'll make in regarding to the appointments. Some of them are for the term and some of them are just for the year. So just ask councillors throughout the term or through the year if you find that the meeting conflicts and you're unable to attend and your alternate also has issues getting to the meeting, that we can reassign those even though they may be for a year or they may be for the 4 years. It's just important that the district has the representation there. And also any minutes or agenda items that you pick up, if you're able to forward them to our staff, then that way they can be included into the reader file so all of council will have the benefit of finding that information there rather than trying to navigate various websites, so that we are all sort of aware of what's happening. Okay. Thank you. Any comments? Okay, then we'll just move adoption on that. Thank you. Special council meeting of December the 8th. Moved by Councillor Parkinson. Second by Councillor Logans. Any errors, omissions, questions? All those in favor? Thank you. Special council meeting December 29th. Okay. Councillor Ray and Councillor Casper. Any errors, omissions, questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. And December the 5th, the special council meeting. Moved by Councillor... Sorry, pardon me, January the 5th. Councillor Ray and Councillor Parkinson. Any errors or omissions? All those in favor? Opposed? Lastly, the January 5th Committee of the Whole. Councillor Berger and Councillor Logans. Any errors? Okay. All those in favor, and thank you very much for adopting that. There's also the receipt of draft council committee meetings for information. That's the November 5th Board of Variance. Move receipt, Councillor Ray. Second by Councillor Berger. Any questions, comments? All those in favor? And motion's carried. Thank you very much. Our next point of business, D1, is Transition Sooke Open Space Meeting, the final summary. We have a delegation today from Mr. Tony St. Pierre and Mr. Jeff Bateman. Welcome, gentlemen.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here tonight in my capacity as president of Sooke Transition Town Society, and here with my colleague Tony St. Pierre, and Mark Ziegler is also here, who's part of the transition core team. And back on October 18th, we organized a open space think tank on the subject of the possibilities and the future of Sooke. We had a group of about 40 people attended, including Mayor Tate and Councillors Pearson, Parkinson, and Ray. And in the room tonight, Cal is here. Cal Fair was there, and Eric, I believe. And yeah, so it was a good turnout, and a lot of great ideas came forward, and we're hoping that this document can help you as you move forward with your strategic plans in the short, medium, and longer-term futures. So I'll hand it over to Tony, who has prepared a PowerPoint presentation on some of the highlights. And Tony's University of Guelph master's degree in urban planning, and he's part of the Cast Iron Farm team and one of our valued core team members. So, Tony?
Thank you, Jeff. Now, let me just see if I can get a... Tina? Oh, there we go. Okay. So, where do I point this? It doesn't matter. That's awesome. Okay. So before I start, I'm just going to let you know that there was a lot that happened that day. We had many workshops, and there's no way that I can actually cover in any sort of depth what the ideas that came out. So this is more of a teaser. I'm going to run through things very quickly. I'm going to give you an idea of some of the highlights, and more information is available in the report. All right? So what is an open space workshop? Basically, it's a very democratic way of getting people together to share ideas. What's going to happen in an open space is we're going to start from a driving question. That driving question is going to bring people to the workshop. Those people are going to self-organize and run their own workshops. And that only happens if people are passionately caring about certain topics. So the right people show up to basically bring forward the ideas and bring the energy and enthusiasm that's needed. Every workshop is where we expect that every workshop will produce a list of recommendations, actions, and people to act upon them. The beautiful thing about an open space is that you can go from 0 to 60 in almost no time at all. As long as you have food, people generally show up. No, seriously, that's the secret. That's what my masters taught me. That was it. Pizza. Pizza brings people together. It's kind of like a medicine wheel. I don't know. It's just strange. Anyway, if you have food, people come together. Those ideas come out. You can be prepared to be surprised. There's always interesting and different ideas that come out of these sorts of things. And ideally, you have in 1, 2, or 3 days going from exploring to a solid report to really solid recommendations and team people to move forward. The question that we used was, in a spirit of cooperation and self-reliance, the people of Sooke have successfully established lives, overcome hardships, and responded to change for more than 160 years. And the people of the Sooke Nation have done so for much longer. Within this tradition, how can we elect and support a council that will transform current and future challenges into opportunities? So how can we support our council in going into the future of Sooke? The morning sessions dealt with energy independence and collaboration with the Sooke Nation, council and community relationships, dealing with the structure, oh wow, that did not go through well, communications and integrity, emergency response services, quality of life, which dealt with beautification, trails and parks and infrastructure, and the afternoon sessions dealt with health, education and social services, jobs in the environment, and local food economy. Now, keep in mind that many of these workshop titles involved several people facilitating and co-managing them, because there were so many people wanting to actually put forward their ideas that we had to group things together a little bit. So these generally represent more than one idea kind of rolled together, and that's going to come out a little bit in the information. The recommendations for the energy independence, the big thing was we need to use 7th-generation thinking and work with the Sooke Nation for a greener future. They've already got solar panel installations, they've already got greenhouses, there's a lot of stuff happening in that direction. Collaboration would really benefit everyone. In terms of council and community relationships, I think the big thing that came out was better access through technology. So using podcasts, using the website to provide easier access to documents and meeting summaries, and a possible radio station, that the residents of Sooke need to have a better understanding of how council actually operates and works so that they can be involved in a really meaningful way. And that one of the more meaningful ways that they can be involved is through advisory planning committees, task force, and so on and so forth that could collaborate with council to help move towards better decisions and more information about what Sooke residents really want. Emergency response services. The big one was developing an effective community emergency plan, and most of the things below here are recommendations that would fall potentially under that. There were several of the different workshops that pointed to a wish for either an emergency services coordinator or a volunteer coordinator or a food security coordinator as a paid position, somehow with funding being scraped up from either the city or some other source. But that's a recurring theme. I'm going to point to some of the things that I think are recurring themes just because it helps boil things down a little bit. Recommendations from the quality of life workshop, which included beautification, trails and parks and infrastructure. There's a need for a unified vision with community input, and citizens need to be familiar with Sooke's official community plan and push for it to be honored. So putting more emphasis on parks plans, on park trails, on collaboration with East Sooke and Otter Point, and other areas to basically come up with something cohesive, to have trees that actually fit the environment. They don't have to be watered and really work. We'll just wait a sec. That's okay. That's okay. And to work with the province to get bike lanes on Highway 14, to encourage multi-use zoning so that people can live and work in their homes, signs for tourists and residents, better parking for tourists, and I guess, and residents, and so on. Gathering place came up in a couple of places. This particular workshop really did boil a lot of things together, so I've put some highlights in bold. Health, recommendation that District of Sook must understand Sook's primary healthcare issues and then be our effective voice with the Island Health and other authorities. In terms of council and staff with the local community groups, the councillors should take initiative to understand community issues and attend meetings, but at the same time, those community groups have to make sure that councillors are well informed and invited as to when meetings are happening and how to approach that. That we need a community place for youth and youth elders, and youth elder mentoring programs, business and art projects, and essentially have a plan that's shovel ready as funding opportunities come up. Within education, hoping to have more emphasis on adult education opportunities, perhaps through EMCS's work with Campbellton College or by attracting post-secondary satellite campus. And I already spoke about improving volunteer coordination. Jobs in the environment. There was a fair amount of emphasis on creating more jobs locally within Sook, either using tourism or elder care, telecommuting, so on and so forth. I think the one that really struck me was plugging retail leakages. Turns out there's a not a listserv, but a group called Sook Mommies or Sook Moms, and it turns out that something like 90% of them were canvassed, and 90% of them did their shopping for almost everything in Langford. And so finding ways to actually keep those retail dollars in Sook seems like that was something that hadn't come up for me. Encouraging local hiring and training opportunities for existing local jobs. So instead of actually hiring outside professionals and outside people for local jobs, actually finding local people to do them and providing training opportunities. And expanding co-op enterprises, which always have a local emphasis. Reducing our environmental footprint through adopting principles of sustainability, including local job creation, and reducing our environmental footprint, and that these principles should be linked and incorporated into the OCP. Council should have subcommittees on various aspects, secure bike lockup near the park and ride, and working with business and council to reduce use of plastics. Okay, this one was huge. I'd like to point out that when you look at the report, you'll find nearly 2.5 pages of single-line bullets full of amazing ideas. There's no way I could cover that. It'd take me an hour, even to do it roughly. So, just this. Creating a Sook Region Food Security Advisory Committee representing all of the different groups, Sook Food Chi, Sook Farmers Club, Sook Farmland Trust, and so on and so forth. You can read through it yourself. Source and secure funding for a food security coordinator. And pointing out that Sook needs a voice on the Juan de Fuyuca Electoral District Agriculture Advisory Committee. So in conclusion, some of the recurring themes seem to be that advisory committees, task forces, and community groups and staff need to be able to work with council and provide council with the information and feedback it needs to make the best decisions for Sook, and that the OCP is a living document representing our vision for the community and should always inform the direction of council. It came up in lots of different workshops. And that's it. I think that would be time for Q&A.
Thank you very much for the presentation, both for the handout and the PowerPoint. I'm wondering if you are able to provide the PowerPoint to staff so that it may be emailed out. You have it, okay. Any questions or comments from Councillor Casper?
Yeah, I just want to thank you very much for the group and the organization for all the work and time you put into this. You've given us a considerable amount of items that we, I think, should consider and look at seriously. It affects all of us, so I just want to thank you sincerely for all the work and effort. Thank you.
Councillor Logans, then Pearson.
Thank you for presenting to us today. I wasn't able to make that, and I really regret that I wasn't able to. First question, when's the next one?
That's an excellent question. As it happens, one of my hopes...
Can you come to the microphone, please? Thank you.
Sorry. As it happens, one of my hopes with this presentation was simply to present the idea of open space as a tool for future work. It's really useful in policy planning specifically, so if you want input from the community. Transition Sook is going to have to get together and decide on, first of all, what sort of a passionate question would actually motivate people to come again other than pizza. So when it happens is basically depending somewhat on that sort of thing. Obviously, if council wanted to have an open space for some particular reason, they could certainly contact Transition Sook or myself.
Great, thank you. So that kind of goes along my next question, which is what are your next steps as a group with Transition Sook with the information that you collected here?
Well, we're making sure that it's distributed, first of all, because that's one of the things that has to happen with an open space. The report has to be distributed to all the people. I didn't include it, but almost all the recommendations had specific recommendations for transition members to contact specific people to take specific initiatives and to move forward with the actions. Honestly, it would be too long to go through it. I tried to focus on the things that would be of specific interest to council.
Thank you.
Councillor Pearson?
Thank you, Tony and Jeff, for hosting that event. It was really a fun day. I got to sort of bounce between tables, and it was really cool because there was some really solid ideas, and there's some really thought-provoking discussion at that. I think it's timely because we do have our strategic planning session coming up in early February, and I think that the goal for me personally is to take some of these ideas and see how we can move them into our corporate priorities and our strategies there. So again, you know, it's actions that come from those discussions that are going to be the critical piece to this. Is the next steps are going to be actions and where we can take some of these ideas. I have some more follow-up questions and things like, you know, the sustainability piece with Sook Nation, or to Sook Nation, you know, how well is that? You know, we hear that, you know, it's a great idea in the solar panels, and then on the other hand, I'm hearing that there's limitations to the solar panel generation and things like that. Is it the most effective way to generate power? I know it's very clean and very environmentally friendly, but is it sustainable? So is there other ways, like, you know, tidal action and things? There was a lot of thoughts that came out of that session that I think that bear questioning. So well done, and thank you for inviting me, and for everybody else that was there. It was a very worthwhile day. So thank you very much.
Well, I don't know if this is actually a question, but in terms of what sounded like a question, I would speak with Andrew Moore.
Yeah.
Who, you know, has got his finger on the pulse for all that stuff, including grants and, you know, available funding sources and so on. So.
Yeah, my question was more along the line is, okay, now we've had it running for so long, what are the returns economically, environmentally, you know, because, you know, if this, as an example, I'm hearing that the salt gets on top of the windows and then they're less effective and things like that. So what's the upkeep, the maintenance, and where, you know, these, you know, experiments with environmental considerations or generation, we should be looking at the viability down the road. We should be measuring those results too as part of actually trying different things, because there's a lot of opportunities out there, like tidal action as an example, things like that where we should be starting to look to measure the results. You know, like try something, measure it, and then evaluate it. So.
Well, we certainly have tides. Having said that, Andrew is extremely blunt while being completely tactful about whether or not technologies work.
Yeah, absolutely.
So.
Yeah, no, it's very good. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from councillors?
I'll move receipt of the report as submitted.
Thank you. By Councillor Casper and Councillor Berger. All those in favor of receipt? Motion's carried. Thank you very much, gentlemen. It was an excellent day. I appreciate just one moment, Mr. Thought. We'll get to public input in just a second. Yeah, just one moment, sir. We're not quite there yet. I'll just finish this piece and then I'll invite you out. Yeah, no, we have a moment. Just 1 second. Thank you. Thank you very much, gentlemen. The forum was great. It really allowed for a free-flowing exchange of ideas, so the format was excellent. And your timing of today's presentation can be better because we do have our planning session coming in February, so it's a great time to roll things. So thank you very much. Okay, on that note, now we move into the public Q&A, and anyone is welcome to come forward to the microphone, and you have 2 minutes. Please state your name and address for the public record. Thank you.
Richard Thutt, 5735 Woodlands Road. I just want to put some energy into what these people are doing here. You know, that composting and all that. You have to think of that in a perpetual concept. A simple compost will run at 165 degrees. I mean, there's some serious energy. You could heat it with a perpetual concept of all of the community debris, so to speak. You could heat the communities just through that energy, plus the greenhouses and the dirt through the end of it all to complete the circle. That's all I have to say about that.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
Ellen Lors, 5526 Souk Road. I have a couple of questions and some comments. The planning session, is that going to be open to the public?
No, the planning session is closed as per Section 90 of the Community Charter.
Okay. And the last council had a planning session, was open,
No, that session was also closed.
Oh, okay.
And the council before that as well. I think when council rises and reports to put it out to the community for further feedback, that's when the open session and dialogue will begin. But the planning session itself is a closed meeting.
because I attended the last one. Yeah, it was open because the mayor had opened it.
No, the facilitated meeting with Mr. Jerry Berry was a closed
Oh,
meeting.
no, it wasn't with Miss. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Another comment. I noticed tonight that the lights were all off the trees in downtown Souk. And a comment to council would be, it would be nice if we could have white lights on those trees in downtown Souk for the winter, just to brighten it up. So if there's any money in the budget, that'd be nice to do. Another comment on BC Hydro on page 77. Their information there about, let's see, recommendation 48 about as BC Hydro established and research development budget for resource and engineering characterization of geographically diverse renewable resources, if you've ever looked in your BC Hydro bill, there's a rate rider at 5%. And I questioned that because what's that 5%? What is that rate rider? I went through a lot of calls before I found out, but that is actually money that's supposed to go to renewable resource or to BC Hydro, rather, to build infrastructure. Just in case you didn't know, they've been collecting money for years for that. It's just information for you. On page 57, with a report from the RCMP, under the Mental Health Act, there's year to date, there's 112 people under mental health, but I guess this would be a question to ask Sergeant. Was all the things that happened, how many were because of mental health? You know, all the, like sexual assaults, break and enter, whatever, were they related to mental health? Just a question.
We can get clarity when the staff sergeant reports.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, on page 4950, that's about the council conventions, and there was a lot of discussion about this last year as well with conventions and councillors all attending all of these different, the Academy, I can understand that, but then we have the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and Union of BC Municipalities, and that was one of the discussions at the session at the Transition House, was do we need to send all the councillors to these? And with the costs being so high, and because of austerity and knowing that we have situations coming ahead where we will not have the monies, that we need to be cautious and conscientious, and I'd hope that council would be very conscientious of costs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lures. Any other members of the public?
Can't keep me away. Jeff Bateman, 7083 Briarwood Place. First of all, these tablets are brilliant. Well done. paper savings. Awareness Film Night on Wednesday is focused on waste reduction, plastics, and any number of things. So just to let you all know about that. But I'm primarily commenting on the staff recommendations regarding Souk's plebiscites, 2 of them. You're very promptly moving forward. Regarding the No More Tankers plebiscite, I'd like to commend whoever's responsible for that resolution. It's a good, solid first step in reminding Premier Clark, John Horgan, and the members of the Legislative Assembly that Souk voted 2-1 against increased oil tanker traffic. That said, my fear is that such a resolution, like so many, will be read, filed, and forgotten in short order. So I'm hoping that Council will find some other ways to move forward with that very strong, clear statement of dissent against oil tankers. And one possibility is the Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities Convention in the spring. A resolution perhaps could be brought forward at that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bateman. Any other members of the public? Going once, twice. Okay, thank you very much, and we'll move on with that. Oops, sorry. Okay. You would like to move him forward?
Yes, I'll second that.
Okay. Any comments from other councillors? All those in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. Thank you very much, Staff Sergeant MacArthur. One thing I'll just point out to the audience tonight is that with the use of the tablets, the page numbers at the bottom are not there. So if you are addressing a particular item, if you can actually name the heading, we might be able to. So that's why I'm kind of between the 2 pieces right now, so that we can find the item. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Your Worship. Councillors. Perhaps I'll start, Your Worship, just by answering the question about the Mental Health Act. Our records management system, it picks up the primary cause of a call. So most of those mental health files you see there, that would be things like someone calling in that their husband was having a mental health issue, and we went and apprehended the person under the Mental Health Act and went to the hospital. But conceivably, you could have a serious assault where the person doing the assaulting was schizophrenic, but that wouldn't be reported as a mental health file. So those ones are just primarily no offense, almost never an offense, just apprehending people with mental health issues. If you were to look at our statistics through the year, the mental health issues would be a good percentage of the files that are not reported at all as that. There's no way for us to capture it, actually, right now. If that answers the question, I hope that's understandable. Good.
Okay, in our package tonight, there's the monthly mayor report for the month ending October and the traffic statistics for September and the report for November and November. So does council have any questions regarding those reports? Any other questions in general for the staff sergeant? Councillor Pearson?
Yeah, thanks for your report again, Sergeant. It is our strategic planning session coming up in February 13th. I think I asked you, at our inaugural discussion, of, if you have a wish list of, because I heard through the election that one of the concerns of the public was coverage, 24-hour-a-day coverage. And I think all council would need to understand what it would take for us to improve that coverage to 24 hours a day. So, because we are going to be at our strategic planning, so I guess I need to understand, and I'd hope that all council could understand what the nuts and bolts of that are. So your wish list, basically.
Oh, okay. And Councillor, would I be just giving you a report on that for that meeting, or would you like me to present? Or
I'm not sure how that looks, but maybe, I wanted to bring it up tonight.
Yeah.
This is my opportunity to talk to you at this council meeting and get it on the record, is that I think that we need to have that brought forward for our strategic planning session. So I think that our initial discussion was around, okay, what does your wish list look like? So I would defer to staff to actually ask them to, through the mayor. Okay. Is that the right way to do that?
Yes.
For strategic planning, what would it take to increase police coverage for 24 hours a day? What does that look like? In dollars and cents, I guess, probably. Thank you.
Okay, good. We'll get on that. Already kind of on it.
Okay,
Some of you know.
thank you. Okay, we'll take that for now. Okay. Anything else from anyone? Do you have anything you would like to share at this point?
We just, speaking of traffic statistics, we had quite a few of our members that weren't trained in stationary, mobile radar, and laser. So we've just trained everyone. I think almost everyone in the detachment has all that training. That was the other day. So you'll see those statistics spike a little bit. Maybe it can be used as a warning for anyone who's exercising their democratic rights and coming out here that might not want to be speeding the next couple of months till the novelty of doing that wears off. But that's all I have for now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, thank you, just one moment, just how the holiday season went in terms of counterattack and check stops. Was it less, more, the same as previous years?
It was pretty much status quo.
Okay.
And there was quite a few roadblocks around, we did a few major operations, and then it was just left to the members on duty to do roadblocks around the town. And there were a few impaired charges, several immediate roadside prohibitions, but nothing out of the ordinary. I'd say it's status quo.
Thank you. Councillor Casper?
Yes, just in preparation of the information that Councillor Pearson asked for, is it possible to also give us an idea of what other detachments are doing with similar population and size that may or may not have 24-hour coverage or something similar? Because it's so easy, to just do a one-off for us, but I want to put it in context as to what other people are doing. And the other thing I think he touched on quite clearly was the costs associated with making those changes. And is it possible to look at other means or mechanisms within your operational guidelines without increasing the costs? I don't know if that's too complicated, but it really isn't just more money. It's perhaps maybe a different way of providing the service. And I'm not telling you how to do it. But is that, in my mind, if you're having more issues on certain times of the week or days of the week, then I'm assuming that's when you have most of your staff out there, and that's probably natural everywhere. And what are the costs associated with that, i.e. overtime, et cetera? So I think we got to get a broader based picture for us to make a good decision. So it's a lot of work, but I think it would help us to help you. Okay.
Yep, thanks for that. And Councillor Ray has brought that up, so we've already looked into it. One interesting statistic on comparative detachments, if you want to go, I think population is close. Files is Sydney, and they have 32 members. Of course, a little bit of that involves having the ferries there and the international ferry, U.S.-Canada ferry, but their caseload per member is about half of what Sooks is, and the crime severity index, which I can explain to you, but it's pretty much self-explanatory for them, is very low, and for Sooks is one of the higher ones in the province. So that's one example. But there's other ones I've looked into. I'll bring you the stats in February that aren't quite so far off.
Councillor Pearson?
And just to capitalize, the date is February the 13th, so we need it before then.
Yeah.
February the 13th?
That's our strategic planning session, so I'd like to have that incorporated into that strategic planning session so that at least we could put it onto our priorities.
Okay.
So that would be discussed.
Good.
Now, give me a tall order.
As an aside,
Yes, sir.
I will tell you that window where we have no officers on shift; they're on call. And I think I brought this up before, that you'll find, especially with the collapse of the regional crime unit, that do take on the more sophisticated criminals, that will be, that we will get a little bit more victimization. And you saw it recently on New Year's Day with the break into Sea Park.
Absolutely.
So, anyway.
Yeah, I think it's evident that that's our risk, and that we need to be active in reducing that risk, that's for sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Parkinson?
And I'd like to say, just from being on Facebook and all the different sites that are out there, you hear about all the crimes that are happening in town a lot quicker, like the break-in at Whale of a Tale and different places like that. And it seems that it has increased to me, just from reading all these different things that are going on with the slashing of the tires down Road Knight Road, and yeah, quite a bit going on here.
Yeah, those two crimes, of course, completely separate. I'm glad you brought that up, because just one point is that we did recover quite a bit of the property from Tail of the Whale. You might be aware of that. And there was a string of break-and-enters that we have charges stemming from a Victoria PD arrest. And my officers worked very hard on it too. So we have 2 people charged with possession of stolen property, and we've given back a string of, like a lot of property from those break-and-enters. Not everything, but some things surprisingly, like diamond pendants and whatnot. And we're still working on getting it back to the owners.
And I understand they weren't Souk residents. Is that correct?
One is back and forth. The other one's a Victoria resident, yes, if that matters.
Councillor Ray?
Yeah, just for the benefit of the rest of council, Staff Sergeant MacArthur and I met early spring to raise the question about policing in Souk and what the needs are. So it has been on his radar, and as time permits, he has been investigating like-sized communities as well to look at the 24-hour policing.
Thank you, Councillor Ray. Councillor Pearson, did you have one
Oh,
final?
sorry, I'm taking up all your time. How are you doing with your staffing situation that we talked about? Are you proceeding?
We're up to strength as far as police officers, and our what's kind of crippling us is the public servant staffing. We're still at 2, and we need to be at 4. So hopefully in the next few months it'll be straightened out.
And you're still waiting for the one to come down through the system, is that correct, for the transcribing and the like?
Yeah, now, yes, Your Worship. That the competition is finished, and there's no one's been offered the position, but the person who has been successful, who was, I guess, came out of the competition ahead, unfortunately lives out of town and still needs to pass a security clearance. So it's kind of the worst possible situation as far as timeliness, because the security clearance can take up to 6 months.
Wow, okay.
So there were people in the mix that have security clearances and were local, and they didn't come out on top. So it's the process we're stuck with.
Thank you very much for that. We'll ask you, I guess, diarize it and see in 6 months then how it goes. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything further from council? Okay, thank you very much for your
Thanks.
time today. Move receipt of the report, seconded by Councillor Pearson. Any further questions? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Okay, so we're going back then to the bylaws. Bylaw B1, number 609, Souk area specified. Pardon me, specified area amendment bylaw 147-22, Souk Community Association proposed removal of lot from sewer specified area.
Move final adoption.
Second.
Okay, moved by Councillor Casper and seconded by Councillor Ray, I think. Any further questions on adoption? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Okay. Reports requiring action. First up is RA1, Multi-Use Community Center Facilities. And we'll begin our staff report, and I'll introduce Mr. Howie for that.
Thank you, Your Worship. The purpose of this report is just to move along with planning or a planning process for multi-use community facility as a result of the plebiscite that was held in conjunction with the civic election. And at that time, the question was asked whether voters were interested in pursuing either a new facility or a revised facility, and the vote was 3,072 in favor of looking into that and 631 opposed. So our recommendation is that staff and the mayor proceed with looking at options for how this might be accomplished, and to refer it as well to the 2015 strategic planning meeting and the 5-year financial plan.
Okay, thank you. So for council, on the page of the report, there's some suggested next steps. One of them is to establish the task force. There's engaging a consultant, establishing the implementation committee. Any thoughts or discussion on some ideas there that are being proposed? Councillor Casper?
Well, I think it would probably be prudent for us to raise this or discuss this at our planning session, because there are some cost implications associated with it.
Okay.
And I also think that you know, all of these different groups should at least be given some lead time as far as contact is concerned, to see if they are indeed interested. It's just a suggestion. But I think that...
So at this time, are you saying then that's to receive the report and then we'll discuss it further?
I think that the recommendation
Yeah.
is fine.
Okay.
It's adequate, and staff, I'm sure, will come back with some preliminary report or a second stage report to our strategic planning commission, and then we could move forward from then.
Okay.
Because, you know, I don't think this is going to happen in 1 year. It's probably a 2 or maybe a 3-year project, and there are probably a wide range of factors that we're going to have to consider.
Okay. Any other thoughts from council? Councillor Pearson?
Yes, you know, it's the question itself. We have an answer. Is, you know, I think they, you know, if I could, we can't go back in time and reword the question, but I think now we have a clear mandate that we need to move forward, and I think that first step is to get it to our strategic planning session, and have it on the agenda as a discussion. And I guess the recommendation, I support Councillor Casper's thoughts on that. The recommendation appears to be clear enough that we could start something, and I think it's got to start at a high level and move forward, because again, there's a lot of implications here, and a lot of organizations have skin in the game here, and there's a lot of stakeholders in across the community. So I think the object, I guess, is to get going as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Logans?
Just to touch on the groups who are listed in the document we received, they are all on board to go to the next phase. They've been notified already.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Anything further at this point? Okay. Have you moved? Do you want to move the recommendation? Have we done that? No. Okay, so looking for on the recommendation there as outlined on the staff report. Someone.
I'll move the recommendation as outlined in the staff report.
Moved by Councillor Casper, seconded by Councillor Pearson. Anything further? All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, that's great. The second item, RA2, is our second question on the for the referendum, the plebiscite. Okay, so I was just waiting for it to load, and it's the expansion of oil tanker traffic through coastal BC waters. So there is the first point here, as noted on the recommendation, and I'll just remind council of Mr. Jeff Bateman's comment that this is sort of the first step. We did pose the question, and there's a step here, and then secondly, as we roll forward and look at the conventions that we attend, whether that'll be the next step in terms of restating our position and gathering support. The first one up would be the AVICC, Association of Vancouver Island Coastal Communities, which is in April, and there would probably be a deadline of February-ish to get a resolution forward. UBCM deadlines are around June or so, but often at AVICC, that recommendation, if passed, would then be carried by the AVICC, would flow into the UBCM. The two are well connected that way. So often it isn't the case where you need to pose a second one. There's already one there, and then it adds strength when it comes from the one entity to the other. So we can discuss this and then again look at sort of what our next steps after that are. So any questions, or Mr. Howie, would you like to, any comments further to the staff report that's outlined?
Just one, and that's just to point out again that the yes vote on this was 2,618, and the no vote was 1,137. So it was approved by a significant majority of the Sooke electorate.
Thank you, Mr. Howie. Comments or questions from council? Councillor Ray, then Parkinson.
Thank you. I've prepared something, so I'm just going to read from the iPad. As people are aware, by way of background, I was opposed to this motion being placed on the ballot. While I totally agree in principle on the need to protect our coast and marine habitat, I have a number of issues with the District of Sooke participating in any further than the original letter that was sent to Peter Kent as the Minister of Environment with the federal government. Firstly, the District of Sooke has already made comment on its concerns with the expansion of oil tanker traffic, and that occurred in, I believe it was January of 2012. Secondly, I don't believe it's the role of local government to wade into provincial and federal government responsibilities and jurisdictions, and even less responsible to do so without understanding the totality of the resolution and what it means by not having the expansion and what it means for revenue and the economy. What does it mean for the BC government budget with the loss of resource-based revenue for government-funded programs such as income assistance, child care benefits, seniors, pharmacare, resources for our vulnerable populations, hospitals, and the demands on education? How well the government is doing in these areas is not here for debate. But with the loss of resource revenue, what impact will it have on our community members who rely on these programs? What does it mean for members of our community who currently commute between home here in Sooke and the Alberta oil fields? If they lose their employment, where do they go? What happens to the economy of Sooke and if its desire to have economic growth if families have to move away as they can no longer afford to live here? Kinder Morgan has been moving oil in the Strait of Montefiore since the early 1950s without a spill. Many say it's not a matter of if a spill will happen, but rather when. Well, the same thing is being said about the big one hitting Vancouver Island. But the answer on the latter has been to be proactive, taking steps to mitigate and prepare a solid response should it happen. Communities developing emergency response plans and implementation of programs and services such as CREST, our radio communications for emergency situations, buying and storing equipment and supplies to be ready, just to say for a few. For the district, in my opinion, to just say no to the expansion of oil tanker traffic without turning our minds to the consequences of reduced revenue loss and the possible long-term impact on our community could be short-sighted and is an emotional response to something that might happen. I understand that 2,618 people voted and said yes to the question, but 1,100 voters said no. I wonder how many people, for myself anyhow, I don't understand what those economic impacts are, and I don't think I should be supporting a motion without all of the information and consequences for voting yes. So I will not be supporting the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Parkinson.
When we think of oil tanker traffic, when I think of it and I think about the inside passage for Sooke, that's basically where my concerns lie for what I think would happen to our place where we live. So I find it's really hard to say, yes, you can do it elsewhere in the waters, but not in our own. So I too would like more information on the impacts. I have a brother who works in the oil business. So I would like to have more information on what the impacts are to all the people for both sides, not just one. Thank you.
Councillor Logans.
Just quickly, I've worked in Alberta and I loved it, except for the whole moral issue, which was really the underlying issue that I believe these folks voted for. And our role is to support democratically that yes vote, so I am definitely in favor of the plebiscite. And when it comes to the impact of jobs and our local economy, that comment just strikes me so opposite of our presentation from Transition Souk, where we're supposed to be looking at providing local opportunities for local jobs. I know a lot of young people in Souk move out of town because they're unable to find work here, not because they want to find work elsewhere. And that's why I ended up working in Alberta, was because I didn't want to do it, but it's something I had to do. So I'm fortunate to be able to work here because I've been trained locally here by great local folks, and that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Pearson.
Okay, I think that there's, and we knew this was what the discussion would be robust after we asked this question on our plebiscite, but the recommendation seems to be extremely robust as compared to the previous question, and I'm looking for maybe some clarity on the author of this recommendation. It seems to be our question, the basic question in the, should this District of Souk join other municipalities in renewing, restating its opposition to the expansive oil tanker traffic? This recommendation, when I first read it, and don't get me wrong, there's some good actions in here, but it says further, and what troubled me was and be it further resolved that District of Souk should urge the Premier of British Columbia, the Leader of the Official Opposition, and the members of the Legislative Assembly to use whatever legislative and administrative means that are available to stop the expansion of oil tanker traffic through British Columbia's coastal waters. So I think that our original question didn't encompass that. I think we all have it in general that we want a surety that the expansion of oil traffic that we don't want it. I mean, we asked the people, we put that question on there, and now they've said that they don't. So I think we have to think about what our next actions are. I question this resolution or this recommendation because it seems to be more robust than our question was asking. So I am having a little trouble with this recommendation, the way that it's been written. I have no trouble with the way we asked the question. Should we join other municipalities in renewing and restating its opposition to the expansion of oil tanker traffic? Yes. I think that the members of the public have said yes. They want us to do that. This resolution, I'm not sure where this came from or how it came to be. So I'm questioning the author of this recommendation. So that's what I'd like to, through you to staff.
I don't have it here, but I believe it's basically based on the previous resolution of council that went to the Union of BC Municipalities. It's entirely up to council if you wish to strike the further be resolved to tamp it down.
Yeah, no, I have no issue with or wanting to tamp it down or change it. I just think that I haven't had a chance to digest it. When I first read this, I was like, oh, okay, that, I'm going to support the recommendation in some form because the public has told us that. I'm not sure that I'm going to support this recommendation the way that it's been written. So I need some more clarity around how this came to be. And thank you, Mr. Howie, for that. And I need to think about what I would recommend or what I would move at this point. I think that we owe it to the people. We asked the question, and I think that we have to come up with a recommendation that answers that question. What does the actions look like? I'm not quite sure yet. So I'd like to hear from other councillors.
Councillor Casper.
Well, in light of what I've just heard, I think in the interest of moving this forward, and I note a lot of comments seem to stem around what council had originally asked and put forward in the question on the non-binding referendum. Perhaps we should refer this back to staff and for them to bring something back that's more in line with what could be supported at the council table. Because right now, I too am having a problem supporting the overall recommendation and the entire resolution with the number of whereases, because I've learned over the years that when you get too many whereases, you sort of lose sight of what your main purpose is. And nowhere in our original resolution did we talk about concerns or the opposition of expansion of oil pipelines. That was never part of the dialogue. never part of the discussion that we had around this table, and nor was it part of the referendum that was presented to the public. So I think what we, in order for clarity and consistency, we could refer this back to staff and perhaps through some input from councillors directly to staff, come up with something that is more in keeping, and perhaps that is what could be forwarded to the ABICC and subsequently to UBCM if need be.
Okay. Councillor Berger, I'll just let Councillor Berger and then, okay, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I actually agree with everything that everybody has said, and that leaves a conflicting taste because most recently, Councillor Casper, I do agree. I think if we reinstate exactly what the public told us to do, which was the public site question stated, are you in favor of more tanker traffic? And the one, I don't know the exact wording, but it was quite simple to that point. And looking at the results of how that vote went, of course, I would stand behind that. That's what our community has said, so I support that. Adding a little food for thought when thinking about what Carrie had to say, there is information, there is potential risks, both positive and negative, that could affect our community should there be a lack of traffic. I can't help but remember the lively debate that happened at the UBCM floor with regards to, I can't remember the councillor that said it, but there was one municipality and he was quite well spoken, and he said, so what if the small chance that the provincial government and federal government actually listen to us? Let's say they listen to us and they say, no, it's not going to happen. And you're laughing in the public because that's how the response on the UBCM floor was. Are they actually going to listen to a small municipality? But let's say they do, and that would be a great scenario. But the problem that's faced with that, and this one particular councillor brought up, what are the regulations and what is Plan B? And the discussion then went on to, they'll ship it on rail. Well, as we all know, railroads follow the lowest level of land, so they travel all of our rivers and lakes and streams. So to add more conflicting thought to how it works, the debate on the UBCM floor was really quite interesting, and I learned quite a lot because which way is the appropriate way? Where are the regulations to support either or? And then, where do we go from there? So anyways, that's digressing, but getting back to the point, I do agree with supporting what was put on the plebiscite question as our community did agree to that.
The plebiscite question was just, should the District of Sault join other municipalities in renewing and restating its opposition to the expansion of oil tanker traffic through coastal BC waters? And then, as Mr. Howie pointed out, this resolution is based, but expanded in the sense that there's been some things that have happened, like in terms of our plebiscite and the like. So it's basically what was submitted back in 2012. I believe that council had supported, but adding in the result of the November 15th piece in the middle, and that's why the whereas is growing there. Other thoughts that came out of UBCM is that perhaps until the technology improves to a point where it's clean and a future generation comes up, then the oil should just stay in the ground and not be expanded out. And there should be a greater move towards alternative energy, and then therefore the pipelines and the rail safety are a non-issue because it's alternative renewable sources. So those were also points made. But Councillor Pearson, you had another question?
Well, and it's not a question, it's just a comment, is that I fear that if we put this recommendation together the way that it is now, it will just go to UBCM and go on a shelf. I think if we join on other municipalities and say we're opposed to expansion of oil tanker traffic, as we asked the question, keep it simple, as opposed to, the leader of the opposition and all these things that we'll put in there, then there's more of a chance that people will read it, understand it, and say that there's opposition out there. We put all the, to Councillor Casper's point is, whereas, he has, this, that, it starts losing its meaning or its intent. Keep it simple. We're opposed. We ask the people of Sault, and they're opposed. So I think that we have to simplify it, and then the message stays the same. So, or succinct for me. Okay, that's what I would support a recommendation that we go back to staff and simplify the recommendation to reflect the question that we asked.
Okay, Councillor Ray.
Is that a referral?
That's what I would refer. That's what I would do. I'd like to make a motion that it refer back. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Ray.
Thank you. And just to follow up on Councillor Berger's comment about the resolution that was already on the UBCM floor, my recollection was 52 to 48%. So it was a very, very close vote in terms of a very similar question. And I think just to add to what I've already said, my concern is that we put a question out there that was fairly simple. Do you oppose or do you support the expansion? The problem is that there's no information, there was no informed information handed out to the community as to what the cost is of voting yes. And so for me, it's like making a decision on half of the information. And again, I'm not suggesting that I don't agree in principle, but to make an informed decision requires both sides of that debate. And I just don't feel that the people in the community had all that information, because I didn't have it, and we haven't had it before this council as a report.
Okay. Any further, Ms. Sprinkling, was there? Okay, nothing? Okay. So the motion on the floor is to refer this back to staff. And we have that moved in second. Anything further? Okay. So all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay. So we'll send that back.
Has his job cut out for him.
He does indeed. And also, perhaps depending on timing, it's still, I mean, for me, it was something that was on the ballot and it should flow forward. And in terms of next steps, it's also something for us to consider at our strategic planning session. So we'll see how that next report goes. Okay, the next piece then is RA3 2015 Council Conventions. And so in the staff report, there's an outline. At the start of the term, staff sent out an email just to council asking what interest they had in attending the various, the Leadership Academy as well as the other conferences. So you'll see here, staff have listed out the location, where they are, roughly what the expenses would be. There's a few, the FCM has a flight involved, the rest are just car travel. And at this point, roughly who is signed up for what. The first one coming up is the Local Government Leadership Academy. Those are all fixed now, so at this point we cannot pull out in council. The only other expense not listed here would be any sort of travel or incidentals. And then there's the other one that are here that everyone is signed up for. And there are deadlines, and staff will advise us as to when the cancellation dates are, because that's where you would end up losing the whole registration fee and sometimes the hotel. So one thing I have thought, though, is that this has come up often in terms of the value for the taxpayers for council to attend these. Some comments raised during the election was whether or not we should all be attending them. It's sort of been quite loose where they get sent. People who go. It's usually not all of council attending everything. The policy itself for this was adopted in 2008, so it's almost, it's over 10 years old as a policy. So the other thing, it may be timely for council to actually review that policy itself. Times have changed from 2008 to where we are in 2015. So I'd just like to get some thoughts from around the table here as to whether or not we should bring that policy forward, look at refreshing it and updating it to reflect the current time. Does council just want to leave it as is? Obviously, just giving the feedback that comes to date, I think as a council we've done sort of a poor job in communicating the benefits of these of the different conferences and what they actually mean. The district business that occurs there, the minister meetings, and all that is not often widely communicated. Sometimes it's our only chance to advocate or bring forward an item to a particular minister, and they like to do them at this, it's particularly UBCM at that time of year. That's when the province sets those timelines. It's our opportunity to get forward and to raise matters. Going forward this term, though, I'd like to see a more cohesive approach, so to take our priorities and to bring them forward, to actually have strong points that we're advocating for. Councillors that don't go should also feel informed as to what passed at conference, what support, what encourage. If you can't go, other members should bring that forward on behalf of you and the work that you're doing and so forth. So Anyway, that was a lot of talking, so what do other councillors have to say? Councillor Casper.
Well, I strongly advocate and recommend that any councillor who chooses to go to any conference be allowed to go. And the reason I take that position is that this community does not live in a bubble or within a bubble. And I think it's important for us to go and learn from what other communities are doing. There's no point in reinventing the wheel and trying things that perhaps are doomed to failure, and we could learn from other experiences. That's what I found in my 30-plus years of public life. And I strongly recommend and will actively advocate that every single councillor take the opportunity, if they can, to attend any conference that they wish. Our staff go to all types of conferences and events that provide them with opportunities. We encourage that. We're mindful of the costs, but no one, in my mind, should be denied. And I've taken that position throughout my public life. If you note the cost associated that's projected right now is substantially lower than what it was in 2011. And I think it was $38,000 during that fiscal year, maybe closer to 37. And I think we're in under that so far. So, as far as costs, we've done a lot over the past 3 years to help reduce those costs and to ensure that those who have an interest and have the ability to go are the ones who have chosen to go. Anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Councillor Pearson?
I work also for another large organization that travels to lots of conferences and meetings, and I was in Vancouver today, and I know there's lots of times people focus on costs, but what I've been trained to do is focus on value, and this being my 4th year on council and back, I haven't been able to attend a lot of these conferences. The ones that I have attended, I have found to be very valuable. What I have found is that the councillors who have taken, and I look at this little spreadsheet that's put out here, I see it sparsely or somewhatly populated. I've taken great pleasure in talking to all of the councillors that have been, and the value they've brought back to me of the information, and its consistency across organizations is really the value that comes back. I haven't found anybody who said that it was a waste of time or it wasn't of value. I have found value by my other fellow councillors going and bringing information back. So no, I support the going. I think that we've demonstrated over the last 3 years, and again this year. I look at this scheduling for this year. It looks like it's not a big free for all and everybody going. So I think there's some prudent decisions made around this. So I support.
Because not everyone can go to everything anyway, so this is just sort of at this point what the outlook is, and then often you'll find that others would, rather go to somewhere else than a political conference because of the amount of time that you have off or work or whatever. Any other comments from other councillors? Councillor Parkinson.
I too believe that it's worthwhile for councillors to go on conferences, to be informed, and to meet other members of other municipalities so that we can work together for different projects, such as us working with Colwood or Langford or with the Tassau Nation, so that we can be informed of what's going on and that we do know what is happening. So I think that it's good for everyone to attend when they can.
Okay.
I would also like to see, though, that with each of, like, AVICC, so we have that written down, but for the public to understand what it is. So it might be an idea to have a write-up, whether it's in the paper or whether it's on our website, stating what we get from each of these conferences, what's involved in what we're doing, because FCM is for all of Canada, UBCM is for all of BC, AVICC is for just the island, so that the public will know what we're doing and what we are.
And that's why I think there can be better communication done as to what it is. It isn't just a big networking wine and cheese event. Like, it is a working dawn to dusk type of event, the various resolutions and what they cover. But again, we just sort of go and don't bring that information back. So, and it's the island. The AVICC moves around the island to the communities that can host it. Souk hosted it in 12, so there was no travel costs for any of us that year. UBCM is provincial. Given the size, though, not every community can host it, so it usually bounces between Vancouver, Victoria, and Whistler, mostly between Vancouver and Whistler. Penticton's had it, and Kelowna, but I think just the size and scale of the group, it's moved more to those centers. And the federal one moves around the country, and again, it's to large areas. So this year, I believe it's in Edmonton, then it goes to Winnipeg, then to Ottawa, and then to Halifax. And so it's sort of centered and out. And so in this case, there's flights involved with all of those. So is there any interest in bringing the policy back and reviewing it? I'm not really hearing that around the table. Okay. I think what I am hearing, though, is some communication, some before and after talk. I think as a council, too, when we form our priorities and we look at what we want to raise with ministers, it would be good to take a good approach to that. So on that note, there is a recommendation there for that council confirm attendance at the following 2015 conventions and seminars as noted. Is anyone prepared to move that recommendation? Moved by Councillor Logans. Seconded by Councillor Parkinson. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you very much for that. Reports for information. So at this point, as we roll forward and we start sort of getting our legs under us, it would be timely for council to talk about different items to report out and share amongst each other. It's been busy for me over the last few months, different meetings and the like. The CRD board has formed. Our orientation is this Wednesday, and there's a list sent out of various subcommittees and the like. So I put my name down. I'll find out on Wednesday for sure which ones I'll be actually appointed to. There has been some communication out coming to the other commissions and whatnot that have been circulated to councillors, so I think you'll find yourself finding your way to various orientations there. And then in terms of the liaison and the other committees, we're waiting till our strategic planning session for that to occur, and then we can go out from that point. So I'll leave it, but I did hear that there is an award that deserves some mention here, and then I'll shift over to the CAO.
Okay, I just want to make one comment too for the Housing Trust.
Yes.
So I still have not heard any word on that. So does that come through the district? Or do they know that I'm appointed to it, or what happens?
They know that you're appointed to it.
So I should get an email?
Yeah, so
I have
usually
no idea who's on it.
A CRD staff person, and Henry Kampoff is the Housing Secretariat. So that'll likely come, I would say, in the next couple weeks.
Okay.
It's going to be a busy year, that's what I know for that committee. So they could just be looking at the lay of the land and also determining who's going to be chairing it. The person that chaired it before, so there's just some bits and pieces there.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I would just like to say that last year with the previous council, the Arts and Beautification, the Mayor's Panel on Arts and Beautification, and the Communities in Bloom went out and decorated the town for Christmas, and we had, for making swags and decorating the town, over 24 people from staff to the residents helping out with the decorations. And it was really well received this year, and there were a lot of great compliments on what has been done around town, so that was really nice. And then we requested from council to be able to participate in the Festival of Trees for the Children's Foundation. So the Communities in Bloom committee got together, and there was Ellen Lewers and Sandy Jarvis, Sandy Cummings, Karen Stone, Tina Hansen offered to help. She was there, Abby Sprinkling, and myself, and we received first prize. So that was really nice for our work for our tree, and it raised $16,000 or whatever for the Children's Foundation. So it was really nice. Thank you.
That's great. Congratulations.
Thanks.
And thank you.
It's fun. It was fun. Good community support, so that's good.
Okay. Does anyone else on council have a report or an item to share at this point? Okay. Mr. Howie, is there a verbal update on any matter at this point?
Not this evening. There will be at the next regular council meeting.
Okay, thank you. Okay. right, thank you. So on that note, our next, we've adopted the RI1. So RI2, we have the Sioux Fire Rescue Service monthly staffing report for October and November. Chief Sorensen is in the room. So I'm just waiting for this to load. There's just a, okay. Here's the report here for the monthly staffing report. Does council have any questions about the reports for October, November, and I believe, yeah, October and November?
I'll move for receipt.
Second, okay. Councillor Pearson, did you have a question? No. Chief, do you have any comments or questions or anything to share regarding the reports?
Not specifically, no. It'd probably be more in the year-end report that will cover things. But you will notice in the next month's report that we're starting to lose members. So there will be a significant decrease in the next month or two.
Can you share some reasons why?
One of the recruits dropped out because of work commitments. One fellow is leaving to pursue education opportunities. Two got full-time jobs in career departments, and another one is left for medical reasons, but may come back down the road. And there may be a couple more going to career departments. We're still waiting to hear.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'll look forward to receiving your year-end report. Okay. Nothing else? All right, I'll call for approval to receive. Or sorry, the motion's put. I just need all those in favor. Thank you. Motion's carried. Okay. So that brings us to RA3, Finance Department, a verbal report, a review of the preliminary assessment information. Mr. Dillabaugh.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just bringing forward, everyone should have received, or if you haven't yet, I would recommend contacting BC Assessment, your 2015 assessment for your properties. And just bringing forward for Council's information, preliminary report of the assessment roll. I'll note that this is just, as I say, the preliminary roll, what's called the completed roll. And after this, we will then receive the final revised roll at the beginning of April, and that's what we will base the tax rates on, based on the financial plan. Some of the publicity that went out with the assessment noted a decrease in residential properties as a result of the market, and I will note that is in fact the case. However, just as in summary, for all classes of properties, the total assessment from the end of 2014 to the completed roll of 2015 has increased 2.2%. That's $43.4 million. And it kind of breaks down in two ways. There's an on-market change, which is really what it sounds like. It's not the market, how the market has changed in driving the assessment. There's a couple of factors involved in the non-market change, especially this year. One is that, of course, the new construction or subdivisions or the creation of new properties and new assessment. The other, in Sioux, there was a significant desktop audit that was done by BC Assessment this year. I know a number of residents you probably received or had to fill out paperwork associated with your property. And that's one of the ways that BC Assessment refines and updates their information and their numbers. So any effect that had for this year will also be included in that non-market change. And the non-market change overall is about 5% increase. It's $97.5 million in non-market change this year. So that's a significant and definite positive for us going forward. The market change overall decreased 2.75%. That's $54 million and a little bit. The majority of that, as with everything in Souk, is in the residential category. And as I say, the net and total change between those two resulted in the $43 million increase and 2.2% increase in assessment. So that's kind of where we're at, positive numbers, even though some of the publicity out there is perhaps that things are going down. I wanted to bring that forward and mention that, in fact, the overall assessment in Souk has increased based on the completed roll, 2.2% or $43 million. So if there are any questions from councillors related to this, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Okay, thank you. It was 2%. So after you take in the factor, there is 2.2% overall increase.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And property owners have until early February to appeal.
You have until February 2nd this year. It's
Okay.
the last day of January, but the January 31st lands on a weekend this year. So you have until February 2nd to appeal your assessment if you wish.
Okay.
I'll add a little quote on that, though, is if you appeal, it could go up or down. It's not guaranteed that it will just go down.
Right. But you may want, right, okay. And then in terms of the desktop audit that went out, is that something now that they're doing every year, or was that just a one-off in 2014?
I'd have to refer, I mean, I can only speak generally on their behalf. It's not something that will happen every year.
Okay.
It's something that they regularly, I believe, they cycle through the areas in the province. As you can imagine, it's a significant amount of work for
Sure.
BC assessment staff. And they are, like everyone, strapped with personnel and increasing significantly in the number of folios within the province that they're having to assess. So it's not something that you'll see every year, but again, a positive for us in that it created and generated a significant increase in assessment.
Thank you, Mr. Dillabaugh. Councillor Casper?
Is it possible for us to get a copy of all the classes of property and the preliminary assessed values? Could we get the copy of that information like we have had in previous years?
Through you, your worship, yes.
Okay, and the other thing is that can you break down the number of new folios or properties, buildings that have been added to our tax roll like we have last year to, to clearly determine the non-market increase in taxable assessed properties added?
The non-market increase, as I say, overall is $97.5 million.
Right, but
and I have it here by class as well.
Right.
Not necessarily. I'd have to double check whether I can do it by actual number of folios,
right,
or
new
not.
ones
I'm not
that came
sure,
on.
but I do have it for total assessment. Yes.
Yeah, because, when they did the desktop, I spoke to their office today. Basically, that's a reassessment of each of the properties, and you could say that's market as opposed to non-market, because everybody would fall in the same category. But they targeted neighborhoods, mine included, which I'm not opposed to it, because I think that property values should reflect what the market is. I think we all strive for that, whether it's up or down. So I would greatly appreciate that information, and thank you for the report.
Any other questions from councillors? Okay, we'll look forward to receiving that. Thank you, Mr. Dillabaugh. Okay, moving on to, yes.
Do we not need to
Receive the verbal report? Good point. A motion.
I'll move receipt.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Berger. All those in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, new business. On the yellow sheet, there is a motion to close the meeting to the public after the regular council meeting. Moved by Councillor Berger, seconded by Councillor Ray. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on to correspondence for information, or pardon me, requiring action is C1. Is the correspondence dated December 2nd from Hudson Hope regarding the referral of a proposed Site C dam project to BC Utilities Commission. And At the bottom of the letter from Mayor Gwen Johansson, it just says, we ask you to review our November 18th letter and to consider resolving to support our request for a 1-year moratorium and BCUC in consideration of less expensive alternatives to Site C. Or you can just make a motion to receive the report.
I make a motion that we just receive the letter.
Okay, motion to receive by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Parkinson. Any discussion? All those in favor, motion's carried. Thank you. Okay, correspondence for information. I-1, this is correspondence dated November 1st, 2014 from the Islands Trust to the Minister of Transport regarding pleasure craft sewage dumping. Move receipt by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Berger. Any comments, questions, feedback? All those in favor? Carried. Next is correspondence dated November 16th from Rob Martin regarding derelict vessels in the Souk Harbor and Basin. And there is a letter there with some photos, and you may have received others just with some sort of abandoned junk in our harbor that's sort of sitting there. Any comments for Councillor Cass? Yes, sir. Councillor.
So, I know it's weighty stuff, but I'm not being, make a trivial reference at all. But, I think that it's important to note that these things occur, and it's on both sides of the water, whether it's in the Wandafuka area or the Souk municipal area. And I just, without us getting involved in taking on a huge problem, how are these matters solved? It's a huge weighty question. The last time the district did something about it, they spent over $100,000 and then applied for a grant, and luckily the district got a grant to cover it from the federal government. But I don't know, I asked staff, how can these matters be dealt with?
Just off the top of my head, Your Worship, actually the federal government recently put out a pamphlet on derelict vessels, which doesn't give much comfort. And it's really a question again of resources, and you can just read in both the Victoria newspaper and Vancouver newspaper that the same problems are existing in larger ports as well. The district has a couple of times dealt with individual vessels if they have been on the shoreline rather than in either federal or provincial waterways. All we can do really is to forward, as this letter suggests, forward information to either the federal or provincial authorities.
Yeah, and basically what came back is that unless it poses navigational challenges for boats that are in or out, it just sits there, and like it is, unfortunately. Councillor Berger?
Yes, thank you. I would agree with us trying to lend our support to Mr. Martin. I sat in on the discussions at UBCM and FCM, and I, too, as our CAO said, was really disappointed. There was a lot of people standing behind the issue, and all coastal communities have this problem. Mm-hmm. And the provincial and federal government just basically wave their hands and say, well, who's going to pay for it? We don't want to, but yet it's not our jurisdiction, only if we touch it or if it lands on our soil. So I don't know what help we can provide, but as a municipality, I don't think it would hurt for us to lend our support to Mr. Martin in his complaint by saying we'd like this addressed. I mean, unfortunately, I don't see it really going anywhere. It was a long debate at UBCM, but whatever we can do to try and get them to look at our harbor or basin, which every other community's pleading the same case. So I would support trying to help him in way of, I think he asked for a letter of support or something. Someone need to fill out the complaint for the perceived violation. But he basically says the violation will then get into the bureaucratic process. However, it would be relatively low priority, so.
Yeah, so I think it's a matter of, we can respond to Mr. Martin, and at the same time, I think it was in 2010 that council put a resolution forward to AVICC and then UBCM, and it passed. It was carried and supported by the electorate, and then it's sitting there on the books right now. So, and it comes up at both of those communities all the time, resolutions that are similar. So, you know, any delegate that's going could support the motions as they pass. But in terms of, I wondered what action to take,
Yeah.
Mr. Martin. Mr. Howie, do you have any ideas?
Well, if council just passes a simple motion that we follow up on this request, we can do that.
Okay.
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Berger. Seconded by Councillor Casper. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Okay. Then we have the Councillor Reader File I3, October, November, December. So these were where various pieces of correspondence come through, and sometimes they are emailed out or sometimes they're passed forward. In the council or meeting room downstairs, there's a binder called the Councillor Reader File where all of this goes. It goes in month and then into date order. So this is where if there's any committees that you go to, agenda items of interest that you may be interested in, you could have them, pass them through to Bonnie and Tina, pardon, Ms. Hanson and Ms. Sprinkling, and then they can circulate them there, and then they're here. And then as they come forward here, there's an item we can pull them forward for future discussion. But this is where you don't want to get too bogged down, but at least it's a way of keeping information back and forth. So they're just here. The one point to note, though, that items here can then become formed. They can be FOIPable through Freedom of Information requests, so they do sort of become part of the public record that way. So it's just something to be mindful of as you go forward. Councillor Casper?
So is it possible, when these letters are received, is it possible for us to also see the copies of any responses that have been generated by the district?
Yeah, because sometimes they'll, like, if there was a response, that's where it would come to council, and then, yeah, you can see the response letter go out, and that would be good. So then you could see the two together.
So further to that, is there not a letter that's sent out that, thank you very much for your correspondence?
Well, sometimes these are newsletters.
Okay.
Right?
So if it's newsletters, fine, but if it's a letter or if it's some kind of, or whatever it is that's relevant, that could mean moving some business forward, I would like to see what all those are.
Okay.
I just think that part of it is that there's a lot of things here that I don't really want to see. Really, I don't want to see the information.
Okay.
And there's items that I think if somebody's asking us something, or if somebody's trying to figure out something, or somebody's copied us on something, and if I think courtesy, we should at least send them a nice note. Thank you very much for your correspondence. And if we do that, well, then that should be attached to the file. Does that make sense?
Okay, I think what we could do, we can look at that and see how that flows, depending on the item, without it being overly taxing. Ms. Sprinkling?
The process we follow is that if it goes in the reader file, it usually doesn't require a response.
Yeah.
If it does require a response, it comes to council or to the mayor for a response. And in the odd time, we actually put something on there that we have responded to, but it doesn't require council decision. That just goes on that council reader file as well. So there's nothing in the council reader file that requires a response from council.
Yeah. And if there was, like if business was being moved, then it would have come forward through the agenda, like some of the items here where they're asking something specifically, or, sometimes it's like, oh, I think maybe council would be interested in this, and it comes forward. So Okay, a bit, point
Reason
taken.
I raise is because on the action side, they're all
There's no
blank.
action. Maybe
There's
we
no-
should look at deleting
there-
that
there's-
column.
There's no action, right? So I'm thinking, oh boy, well, all this stuff came in and nobody did anything about it.
Oh, I see what you see, yeah, okay.
That's all I'm saying, just as a follow-up.
Right.
Then I'll watch better that's filled in if there's a response. Yes, you're correct.
It hasn't been something like a tool that we've used in a while. I'd like to bring it back and have it going again, so I think, maybe over time, we'll see some more activity there. Okay. Any further discussion on that? If I could get a motion to receive those reports, please? By Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Parkinson. All those in favor? Thank you. And there's no notices of motion, but there is a report of an in-camera resolution from October 27, 2014, and that is the Sioux Road Roundabout Memorandum of Understanding with MOTI, and it's noted there both in the paper and the online copy. So I think we don't need, is there any action there? No, that's just, we've risen and reported already. So on that note, a motion to adjourn by Councillor Pearson and moved by Councillor Logans, and then a motion to move in camera by Councillor Ray and seconded by Councillor Berger. Excellent. Thank you very much. Drive home safely.